California under Gavin Newsom is observing yet another departure. But this occasion it is not families relocating or businesses transferring. It is the industry that transports 70% of America's cargo, the foundation of the national supply chain. Without it, grocery store shelves vacant, hospitals operate short on critical supplies, businesses halt then terminate within days. This is not theoretical, it is logistics. And right now, something is developing in California that carries ramifications far beyond the state's boundaries. The effects will reverberate through the entire American economy. The alert signals are already apparent. And politically, this moment may arrive to define the concluding chapter of Gavin Newsom's record. Meet Assembly Bill 5, executed into law by Governor Newsom in 2019. On paper, it carries a noble intention. Its declared purpose is to protect workers from exploitation. In practice, it operates very differently. It operates as a blunt instrument, one that has devastated independent truckers across the state. At the center of the law is what is recognized as the ABC test, a rigid standard that reclassifies independent operators in approaches that numerous simply cannot survive. At its core, the law applies three tests the state utilizes to determine whether someone is an independent contractor or an employee. The initial two are relatively straightforward. Truckers must demonstrate they regulate their own schedules, operate free from a company's direct supervision, and operate established businesses of their own. On those points, most independent drivers can comply. It is the third test where the trap is activated. That final requirement is an absurdity. Under Assembly Bill 5, California examines the relationship between an owner-operator, an independent driver who possesses his own rig, and the contract he executes with a carrier to transport freight. The arrangement is elementary. The carrier secures the load, and the trucker transports it. But under this law, the state demands something impossible. The trucker must be contracted to execute work outside the usual course of the carrier's business. In other words, the driver must transport freight for a freight company while somehow not accomplishing the very work that company exists to accomplish. The law is explicit. To prove independent status, a trucker must be contracted by a carrier to execute work outside the carrier's normal course of business. That is the standard composed into Assembly Bill 5. And here is the absurdity. A carrier's normal business is transporting freight. A trucker transports freight because that is what truckers accomplish by definition. Then the independent driver is executing the carrier's core function. Under the law, that alone signifies the test is failed. There is no alternative interpretation. The statute does not inquire whether the work falls outside the trucker's business. It inquires whether it falls outside the hiring company's business. And since the hiring company's business is trucking, every independent driver is automatically disqualified. The result is unavoidable. Truckers forfeit their independent status and must be reclassified as employees. This is where the trap closes. Once reclassified, carriers are compelled to absorb payroll taxes, health insurance, and workers' compensation costs. The law compels them to assume obligations they were never structured to carry. In effect, it imposes forced unionization. Most carriers cannot afford that burden, and so the system breaks, not gradually, but by design. For 4.5 years, the California Trucking Association fought this law in court. Remember, Assembly Bill 5 was executed back in 2019. The challenge dragged on, appeal after appeal, but in the conclusion, it came to nothing. The association finally surrendered, and as of January 1st, the law formally took effect. That is the moment when theory gave way to reality, when the real-world ramifications of this policy commenced to unfold. Landstar, a national freight heavyweight, relocated quickly. This was not a small regional firm, but a carrier with operations across the country. It issued urgent advisories to its California-based owner-operators. The message was unmistakable. Leave, relocate out of California, or you will no longer be capable to function with us as an independent contractor. The carrier was blunt. They were not going to absorb those costs. Period. Full stop. This was not a warning about future enforcement. It was not a projection of what might transpire later. The separation is transpiring now. As the law took effect on January 1st, national carriers, most of them headquartered outside California, commenced cutting California loads from their boards and instructing drivers to depart the state if they desired to continue contracting. The impact was immediate. California drivers who had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in their own rigs, frequently financed through personal and family savings, observed their phones go silent almost overnight. The industry did not wait for the initial enforcement letter. Risk managers made the calculation early. Better to abandon California business now than confront years of retroactive liability and six-figure penalties later. As a result, estimates suggest that as numerous as 70,000 truckers could be compelled out of the state. The ramifications would be catastrophic. Truckers are the economic lifeblood of every economy, from rural towns to major cities. They deliver everything from groceries to medical supplies while generating the tax revenue that sustains schools, maintains roads, and funds emergency services. Remove that backbone, and the damage spreads quickly and everywhere. When truckers abandon a region, urban centers experience the shock just as quickly as small towns. Shelves vacant, prices escalate. No city produces its own food, fuel, or medicine. All of it arrives by road, and matters are made worse by policy selections in Sacramento. While the Newsom administration presses legally licensed owner-operators to either reclassify as employees or depart the state, numerous are being compelled out of business altogether. The result is not reform, but contraction, an economy hollowed out by rules that ignore how supply chains actually operate. At the very same occasion, those lawmakers have demonstrated no hesitation in issuing commercial driver's licenses to migrants who entered the country unlawfully. Consider the case frequently cited by critics. An Indian national who crossed the border illegally in 2022 later obtained a California commercial license and was involved in a fatal crash that eliminated 3 individuals while allegedly driving under the influence. The collision occurred outside California, and the fallout has been severe. Florida officials have since relocated to sue California, arguing that the state ignored federal law by issuing commercial licenses to individuals without lawful status, exporting risk beyond its own boundaries. Whatever one's politics, the contradiction is stark. Legally licensed owner-operators are being compelled out, while standards elsewhere are loosened. The inconsistency speaks for itself. California is utilizing Assembly Bill 5 to crack down on lawful independent truckers, while its licensing policies simultaneously allow migrants who entered the country unlawfully to obtain commercial driver's licenses. Whether this is deliberate or merely bureaucratic dysfunction, the optics are devastating. Legal drivers are forced out of the industry, while others who should never have been behind the wheel in the initial place are licensed to operate 80,000-pound rigs on public roads. But this is only the surface of the damage. The most destructive ramifications for California's economy are developing below the surface, largely unseen for now. And when they completely emerge, they threaten not just the state's supply chains, but the political future of a governor already burdened by the weight of his own policies. This is where the circumstance transforms truly catastrophic. At the very same moment California is driving independent truckers out of the state, it is also dismantling its own fuel infrastructure. As of January 1st, a new state mandate requiring gas stations to upgrade underground storage tanks went completely into effect. Any station unable to absorb the roughly $2 million per site demanded by the regulation is being compelled to shut down. The precise statewide total is still being tallied, but the direction is unmistakable. Hundreds of stations, particularly family-operated rural locations, are closing their pumps permanently, and that generates a new risk altogether. Even when a trucker manages to secure a load, there is now the genuine possibility of operating out of fuel in the middle of nowhere. Supply chains depend not just on drivers, but on fuel access. Remove one, and the other soon follows. And this raises the subsequent question, what transpires to California's refineries? California has just forfeited another 139,000 barrels per day with the shutdown of Phillips 66's Los Angeles facility, and the attrition is not finished. Valero's Benicia refinery, another 145,000 barrels per day, is scheduled to close in April of this year. Taken together, that is more than 17% of the state's refining capacity erased, gone in less than 1 year. The losses are not theoretical. They are measurable, immediate, and cumulative. Now connect the associations. As numerous as 70,000 truckers are being forced out, fuel stations are disappearing, refineries are shutting down. The ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach together handle roughly 40% of America's container imports. When trucks and fuel vanish at the same occasion, shortages and delays arrest being hypothetical. They become routine. Containers are already stacking elevated in terminal yards as fewer trucks arrive to transport them. Quietly, shipping firms are rerouting contracts to Texas and to ports along the East Coast. This is not theory. It is not ideology. It is economics developing in real time, container by container, mile by mile. The genuine cost of these policies is only commencing to surface for Californians who voted for them. Combine Assembly Bill 5's assault on independent truckers with refinery closures and gas station shutdowns, and the result is not worker protection. It is a self-inflicted supply chain catastrophe. Here is what the politicians will not articulate plainly. Every policy carries a price. California selected to elevate union politics above economic reality. The invoice for that selection will not be paid only in Sacramento. It will be paid nationwide, at the pump, at the grocery store, and in the form of vacant shelves. There is no outrunning that ramification, not even for a governor who harbors national ambitions. Supply chains do not respond to speeches. They respond to costs, capacity, and access. In the conclusion, California now stands as a textbook case of the blue state doom loop. Progressive policies make daily existence harder. Families and businesses depart. What remains is a narrower, more ideologically rigid electorate that demands even harsher policies, driving the cycle deeper and faster. Much of the country is relocating in the opposite direction, drawing investment, labor, and growth away from these self-inflicted crises. And the most revealing signal of all is this: